Welcome to the Innovative Pedagogy Podcast, everyone. I am your host, Chris Garcia, and today we are bringing back a guest. If you've been a follower and a listener of the Innovative Pedagogy, we had Dr. Winters join us during 2020 talking about teacher wellness and mindfulness. But today I invited him back as a leader, as a district leader, as an educational leader, as my leader in education as well during our leadership series. And I just want to lay the groundwork. If you're wondering, where does this leadership come from? Well, first off, Dr. Dan Winters was my first school director. He was my principal. And I had the opportunity of working with him for about 2.5 years directly. And then after that, we've continued working on different conversations and leadership and opportunities. But we actually had the opportunity of opening Enrique S. Camarena School in Chula Vista back in 2013. And one of the things about launching a school from the ground, it reveals a leader very quickly because there are no inherited systems, there are no established norms, and you are building culture in real time. But during that time, I've had the opportunity of learning of Dr. Winters' his background when it came to serving as an English teacher, as a basketball coach, as a school administrator, and I've seen him now as a district director and assistant superintendent. And one of the things that I value and admire from him is that across all of these worlds, he's navigated leadership at multiple levels of complexity. So, Dr. Winters, thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of this episode in this leadership series.
Thank you, Chris. It's really great to be here. Great to talk to you about leadership and education. So looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And I don't know if the cat is out of the bag, and if it isn't, I can edit this part later on or not. But is it public as far as your educational journey coming to I'm not going to say a complete stop, but maybe a pause and then doing other things after that?
Yeah, completely public. I'll be retiring from Sweetwater June 30th of this year after 39 years in education. So looking forward to retirement and whatever that brings you, right? It won't be a total stop of work, but something different for sure.
That's wonderful, and I continue to look forward to our conversations and to tap into just the wealth of knowledge and experience. I mean, 39 years. That is not an easy feat, and congratulations. And yeah, I'm grateful that I've been able to be a part of that for the last 13 years. Like I said, like I always attribute the beginning of my career to you, and I want to publicly thank you, even on this podcast. You took a chance on a teacher that had no experience, just come out of student teaching, and to put myself in part of 500 applicants. And we'll talk more about the opening the school later on, but I just want to thank you for giving me that opportunity. And I wouldn't be where I'm at in my career and in my life just without your support and your direction and guidance. So thank you.
My pleasure, Chris. Well, my 39 years, I made a lot of mistakes in my career. Hiring you was not one of them. So that was an easy choice. And you've proven what a great educator you are, a good person. And so you were a big part of that team that we built at Camarena. And so thank you as well.
Well, thank you, Dr. Winters. I'm humbled and I'm honored. And let's kind of go back in time then, if you don't mind. You don't have to state the years. We'll let the people do the math. It's 2026, and you've been working in education for 39 years. We'll leave it at that. But I do want to go back to the first year that you were teaching. And when you think about your first year as a teacher, what do you believe leadership meant at the time?
Yeah, so I can remember that year. So many different things occurred that first year that are unforgettable. One of the things that I recall is that I strove every year to learn my students' names by the first week. So, like any high school teacher, I had somewhere between 150, 175 students. But I knew like learning their names to really respond to them in a personal way was important. And so by the end of that first week, I usually could know every kid's name. And I remember walking through the campus one day and I saw one of those ninth graders. I taught ninth grade English mostly and ELD. And I saw that student. I said hi to him, said his name, and he stopped like a little shocked and said, "How do you know my name?" I'm like, "Dude, you're in my class. Of course I know your name." And so it reinforced to me the importance of that personalization, not just in teaching, but in leading. You've got to know the people around you and take the time to really invest in who they are, not just another name on the um, on your enrollment sheet or a class list, but get to know in leadership, get to know their family, like what their background is. So leading personally was so important. So that was important, I think, in terms of leadership, no matter what type of leadership you're in. The other thing I remember is you talked, I was coach, right? A
Yeah.
very mediocre coach, by the way. But I remember before my first varsity coaching in my second year as a teacher, Tom Snow was the head counselor, and Tom Snow was a former basketball coach at Castle Park High, coached amazing teams in his time. And he said, "Hey, you're never going to forget. This is your first year, first game. You'll never forget this game. Good luck." And he was right. So here I was taking over for my basketball coach, Forrest Parch, who was a stellar coach, been to CIF semifinals, great teams. And at halftime of my first game, you got to picture like games in November when the season starts. Nobody comes to the game. You're in this empty gym. So there's maybe 10 parents in the crowd. And I'm playing San Diego High, who had one of the best teams in the county. It's halftime. We're losing, I think it was 52-11. And all I could hear was the parent of one of my kids cussing me out from the stands at halftime, what a loser I was. So yes, I
Whoa.
never forgot that first game. And I had to learn how to, be humble, have a sense of humor. It got better from there, but those are some of my first lessons in that first year of teaching and coaching, which I'll never forget.
Wow. Wow. And you looking at yourself now, if you could go back 39 years, 38 years and talk to that first year teaching Dr. Winters or Dan Winters at the time, Mr. Winters, and even Coach Winters, what would you tell yourself if you could go back in time and say like, "Hey, I'm going to give you some advice that's going to help you out for the longevity of your career."
I think it's important to enjoy and embrace every role. One of the things I think some early young leaders do is they're ambitious toward whatever goal they're looking for. They want to be a principal, maybe some want to be superintendents, and looking toward that goal. And you should have those ambitions. But at every role, there are joys and opportunities to learn in each one. And so embrace the role you're in, kind of make sure you're present, wherever your feet are at. Don't get too far ahead of yourself, and embrace the lessons you can learn in that opportunity and the people you can serve right then. Those are the ones that matter most. So I don't think I had a problem getting too far ahead of myself. In most cases, I was pretty grounded in terms of I enjoy teaching. I think my goal as I got into education was not to be a leader. I just wanted to teach. And I believe that in that role as a leader, I think of it as a teacher, whether I'm teaching students or now colleagues and current leaders. Teaching is really what I embraced as a educator, and continue to do that whether it's in a leadership role or not.
That's it's you're kind of tapping into a lot of even just what we talked about 6 years ago with mindfulness. And I was actually hearing a podcast, and speaking of person, like just getting personal, we've always talked a lot of sports, whether it be Giants, Padres, or even at the time when we were there at Camarena. I mean, the run that the Golden State Warriors did and whatnot. But I was hearing an interview yesterday with Joe Musgrove from the Padres, and he was actually he pretty much said the exact same thing you said, as far as enjoying the actual role and being mindful of what you're doing at the present moment. And his whole thing was even for him just being able to be present. He said when I'm washing the dishes, when I'm taking my dog out for a walk, and he said I need to learn how to be present in those moments so that way, when the high pressure moments come, especially pitching in the major league sport, I can be present at those moments also and not let my mind wander. So, um, we did talk about mindfulness 6 years ago, but kind of fast forward in 6 years now, is there a defining moment during your time in your career that kind of reshaped how you led? And I kind of know the answer to this, and you don't have to talk too much about it, or you can if you'd like. But because we talked a lot about it 6 years ago when we talked about mindfulness, but is there a moment in your life that kind of reshaped how you led in your career, where you realize like, hey, you know what, I do need to be more mindful and present at what I'm doing right now?
I think I can't think of a particular moment now. Like I believe over time in each role, you pick up new insights on how to lead effectively. Um, And so whether that role was assistant principal, finally principal at several schools, in each one of those ones, you try and pick up insights to help you lead in that context. Um, I definitely applied for jobs I never got. And sometimes I realized later, like, boy, I'm so glad I didn't get some of those jobs. I ended up in a place where I can do the most good. And maybe that ability to just stop being ambitious towards something else and just digging into where I was at and making the best of the situation I'm in helped me be more present
Mhm.
in the places where I landed. So I think each and every one of those experiences gave me more opportunities to lean into where I was at, use the gifts I have, and work with the people around me to help them be better. One of my mission statement as a leader, which I made many years ago, has been the same for that time for probably 2 decades, and that is my mission is to create the conditions where others can flourish. And so
Wow.
that's really my goal. I want to make environments where the people around me do the work. As a assistant soup, I don't teach anybody. I don't lead any school, but can I create conditions where the teachers and the leaders that I work with can get better, so they can serve the students who are in front of them. And that's true whether I'm in the classroom. I don't do any of the work on the tests. The students do, but how do I create the conditions where they can flourish? So that's kind of been the mantra that's led my leadership role over time.
That's wonderfully said. And speaking of conditions and creating those conditions, that's a nice segue to this next part. So we had the opportunity of opening up Enriquez Camarena back in 2013. However, you knew about opening up and being the director of the school about what, a year prior to that opening. What do you remember about leading Camarena and being a startup environment? Like what are some of your like memories from all of that?
Yeah, that was a time of beautiful chaos. I was principal of Salt Creek Elementary, and was probably officially notified in January before an opening in July. So I had 6 months.
Okay.
Never quite got released from Salt Creek. I was sort of released the last quarter, but doing both, which meant we had to hire a lot of teachers. In fact, Camarena still today is the largest school opening Chula Vista Elementary's ever had. We had 950 kids our first year. So during that time, I was again finishing up at Salt Creek, interviewing and observing 35, 40 teachers that we selected. So it was quite chaotic to get to that start date of July, but it was a beautiful chaos. There was so much energy in the community. That community in particular, Winding Walk, had been planned to have a school years before, but the housing crisis really hit that school community hard around 2008, and therefore that school opening was delayed for years. So the families were so hungry and excited to open their school in their community. And we had lots of parent input on designing the type of school they wanted. And then the team we hired, you among so many others, what an amazing group of teachers we hired. I'll never forget the interview process we put. I'm sure you remember this.
Yeah.
We wanted to be a collaborative staff. One of the things we put in the interview process was actually a group question where we brought in 4 candidates together and had them work together to solve a problem, answer a question. And there was just such wonderful dynamics created in that interview process that led to the type of environment we hope to create of really collaborating, working together to create a school that we could be proud of. And I think we did that. We made mistakes. I can talk to you about mistakes for sure, but we got through those and worked together to build something that we were very proud of in that community.
No, I remember that you actually sparked a memory with that interview process and being in a group setting. And yeah, I myself was extremely intimidated because I didn't have, all I had was my student teaching experience and even just the intervention I had done for my action research. And again, like I said, it was my first year teaching. So for me, like opening up a school in my first year teaching, I look at that now hand in hand as far as like, hey, this is the way it should be when you're first year teaching. It should be complete organized chaos and building something out of nothing. And I will say some of the one of my favorite things about opening up a brand new school was no teacher could say, well, we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
And that was actually like no one could say that. And it was actually kind of nice to do that because I being after that, I had the chance of moving to schools that were well established, becoming an administrator for a school that was very well established, and I work with entities and organizations that are very well established as well. But to be able to be a part of something where they're like, we have no track record, and what we are building is authentic. And with that being said, also when it came to building the school culture there at Camarena, what were some of the things that you were leading with to start off with? Like, well, how do I bring all these teachers together? It was almost like you were like Nick Fury, bringing all the Avengers together. I'm like, okay, how do I make us work like a team here? Because you had, and I will say, I'm not tooting my own horn, but some of my colleagues were some of the best teachers that I've ever worked with. So you had a crop of some amazing educators. So when it came to building school culture and bringing everyone in unification, like what were some of the things that you tried to put in place?
Yeah, that was a high-powered team for sure. One of the things I value in leading teams, and that goes back to that whole sports analogy and leadership. Leadership is about building teams, and in athletics, you either do that well or you fail. So I wanted to take advantage of the expertise we had. I believe voice is so important, whether that was the voice of the staff to help build that culture that we did not have handed to us, we had to make it our own. And so you had to balance as a leader, getting lots of input, but also setting a clear direction at the same time. There had to be decisions made. And one of the things I teach young leaders is about decision making. A lot of decisions fall into a couple categories. You have command decisions, which you, for safety reasons or others, you have to make. There's sometimes consultation where you get lots of input, but you make the final choice. And sometimes those decisions are consensus, where you do get a majority opinion before you move. What's important, I believe, is letting teachers or people you lead know what kind of decision is at the outset. The biggest mistake I think leaders make is they set up a decision that they believe is consultation, but the staff thinks it's consensus. So the staff thinks we get a vote on this. It's our final majority opinion that matters, but in the end, you make the call, and there's that disconnect. So we tried to be clear. I tried to be clear when we were deciding what it was like. Even though we would get lots of input, for some situations, I would be making the final call with their input. And I think people honor that. They understand that process if it's clear at the outset. One of the things that I worked real hard to do with the leadership in the union in that school was to be collaborative with our union leaders. And we agreed at the outset to have conversations, to be open about problems. And I remember sometime, I think maybe during the first year, there was a lot of tension. Obviously, you mentioned there was no culture, there was no systems in place.
Right.
And 950 kids, day one, we had issues, no doubt. And they came to me and said, listen, we want to solve these problems. We don't want to talk behind your back. So we agreed to do a staff meeting where they led the staff meeting. They had everybody voice their concerns. I sat in the back, did not participate except to take notes. And I told them I would listen to everything they had to say, would not respond in that meeting, but I would follow up with, okay, here's what I heard in that meeting. Here are the action steps. And I felt that process honored the voices of the teachers. We did make some, I don't remember what the issues were at the time, but we did make slight changes that the teachers, I believe, felt heard. And yet it wasn't a behind the scenes try and sabotage, but it was a real collaborative effort to make our school better. So that idea of getting people's voice, and we can talk about the student voice in terms of naming the school, which was another fun project. That,
Yes.
really getting everyone's voice, but also having a clear direction of where you want to go at the same time, finding that right balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I you know what? I might save the naming of the school for another episode because I actually connected with Sebastian Lengel on LinkedIn.
Oh,
He,
yes.
he is a graduate student now at San Diego State. And I think that would be a good story to dive into. And but
Very nice.
that was great. I mean I didn't forget about how the school was named because that's kind of like every time I think of the Robo Griffins, I'm like, okay, this is the reason why. Here's our rap song that goes with it. Here's our rationale. And this is how the sixth graders and the fifth graders combined forces to be to vote this. We could have been the Camarena Chameleons.
Imagine that. Yes. See, I think we nailed it. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, Robo Griffins. And at the time, the colors too. I mean, the Seattle Seahawks were like with
Yes,
Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch. Like those colors just they just end up influencing Camarena as well. So,
without a doubt. Yes.
well, this is actually even a nice segue now to this next question and the focus, and that has to do with let's talk a little sports, so to for the most part, but coaching and
Yeah.
just kind of your the things that you learned from a coach and some of the leadership principles that you've been able to transfer from being a basketball coach. But not only that, even just yourself being a someone that appreciates the sports, being able to see the likes of a Bruce Bochy or the likes of a Steve Kerr, and even I think the likes of talking about like the likes of John Wooden because of the pyramid of success and things that we've had. And these are coaches and conversations I know that we've had, but can you dive a little bit into just the transferability of coaching practices that you've seen or leadership practices from other coaches that you've either brought into your practice or you've seen worked well within education?
Yeah, there's so many parallels. I mentioned earlier Forrest Parch, who was my high school basketball coach, and he was the coach at Castle Park High just before I took over. I remember his tagline on all the communication he ever sent out said, "Better people through basketball." And so he had that vision that yes, he knew basketball and he coached extremely well, but it was about the character of the person that he was. It was even more important than the basketball that he taught. And you mentioned John Wooden. I think leadership like his, and I'm a 49er fan, so Bill Walsh is
Yeah,
my model for football coaching. Both of them had that same idea that they did not focus on winning. They focused on doing things right every day. I remember John Wooden would teach his players how to put their socks on. And he believed that you focused on the fundamentals. If you do the fundamentals well every day in every practice, then you'll see the results. Of course, he had really good players at UCLA at the time too. That helped.
right.
That idea of doing everything right fundamentally, and yes, you have goals, but you get to those goals by doing the work right every day. As a coach, one of the things I prided myself on was to make practice enjoyable and effective. And I can tell you players who told me they actually enjoyed practice. It wasn't easy, but we tried to make it competitive, have a good time. But again, we were trying to get better every day by focusing on doing those fundamentals well. So that transfers. I think that's what we try and do in Sweetwater today. We're focused on getting instructional practices and improving them throughout our system. Uh, I think in a high school secondary system, what's more important than the 240 minutes a day that students spend in front of a teacher? So we have systems in place, whether it's coaching one-on-one, professional learning communities, instructional leadership teams, all of them, their goal is to help teachers do their work in the classroom better. So I think focusing on the fundamentals of the work you're doing helps you get toward those big, audacious goals you may have as a leader.
Well said. That is very well said. And you actually just what you just shared right now reminds me of what the manager for the Toronto Blue Jays just opened up spring training with this past weekend. And
Mhm.
because I mean, well, as we're here on February 20th, spring training games start officially today. So that's why I'm excited. It's my big, but, and he was talking about like we were this close. He said we were just like a hair size, just like thin of away from winning the World Series. And he said, and we can do it again, but it has to go back. And he said, has to go back to our fundamentals and doing things the right way. And I think you're taking a nice page out of John Wooden's just theoretical philosophy that's stood actually within the test of time. So, but being a coach, being a leader also requires being able to manage different personalities, working with different people, different leaders, people above you, people that are working with you, people that have to follow your directions or your guidance as well. And that requires a way of being able to communicate differently, being able to read the room, being able to have emotional intelligence. And I want to kind of gather your thoughts. I feel like the ideas of emotional intelligence and mindfulness has risen within the last, I would say, I was going to say 5 to 10 years. I was very close to saying 6 to 7 years, and I realized that we might have high schoolers or junior hires listening, so I don't want to trigger them. But I feel like emotional intelligence has been kind of been a topic for the last, yeah, 5 to 10 years for the most part. So can you kind of give me your thoughts on EQ and just you kind of lay the groundwork, and maybe I'll ask you some questions after that of maybe scenarios or situations where you've had to utilize it or you felt like, hey, I could have probably done better. But what's your take on emotional intelligence right now?
Yeah, I think that's an underrated skill, still. And what I've seen over time is that leaders who have struggled in organizations I've been a part of, it's not usually the technical skills that are their problem. It's not usually their intelligence or knowledge. It is that failure of emotional intelligence or relationship building or failing to build relationships. I mentioned to you earlier, leadership, the job is to build teams. And I think to do that well, the first thing a leader has to do is really lead themselves. You got to do a lot of self-reflection and introspection about the kind of person you are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your triggers emotionally? So that when you're in a pressure situation, you are going to get criticized, for example. And how do you not react to that criticism with defensiveness? And absolutely, I have failed in that regard many times. But as I've gotten more experience, I've learned don't respond to negative criticism immediately, especially that rant email that you just want to push back on and send that reply all. Stop and think, get your emotions out of it, listen so that you can understand the concern that person may have. That takes maturity to not take things personal, even when people do make attacks that are personal. Find out what those concerns are behind the words. Try and address those if you can. You may still disagree, but it's really that ability to step back, not to let your initial emotional response be the first thing that you lead with, but have that self-control to think through the problem, answer rationally, acknowledge emotions from both sides, and try and craft a plan that works for everybody. Easier said than done.
Right, right. It is. It is a lot easier said than done. And I will give you I'm gonna give you I've heard the term as of late and I actually like it, but I'm gonna give you your flowers as far as two instances and one will be my first year teaching when I triggered a parent.
Ah, yes. I
I love
remember.
that. Oh, yes. And I learned quickly. Yeah, I learned quickly to separate myself. And even what you just said, even when someone's criticizing you personally, to take a step back. And I learned quickly there. But I'm giving you your flowers as far as you walked with me that entire situation. And while I did lose sleep, while I was very concerned, your encouragement, your words, you telling me everything's going to be okay, we're going to get through this, ended up working out. And I will always remember that. And that's one of the like many reasons why I have high regards for you because and even at my first year teaching, going through a situation where I'm being threatened to like, hey, like I'm being threatened and because of my reaction and me being triggered and even to the point of it going to the news or the district or whatever and you're like, it's okay, Chris, you'll be fine. Let's work with the parent, let's compromise and at that point I put my full faith and trust in like, all right, I'm gonna follow your leadership and your guidance and things ended up working out. It worked out great. I feel like for all outcomes. And then there was another situation where I made the mistake of putting something on social media when it came to oh my God, it was a let's just say it was a very secure question on an exam and the state of California got involved. And you were very like you I could see I remember I had like 10, 15 missed phone calls because I was actually at the gym and I had left on a Friday evening and I had 10 to 15 missed phone calls from you in that one whole hour and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is serious. This is serious." But we talked, I took care of it and then there was some follow-ups that had to happen through after that. But again, the way you coached me, the way you guided me and walked me through this process, and and supporting me, I will never forget that. And those are traits that I ended up taking as a school administrator, and even now working with our district leaders, and working with different esport coaches, and working at a level now where I can impact and consult across our county. I really look at the things that I learned from you and how to guide people, especially if they make a mistake or if something happens. And I will say, even during the year that I was, the year and a half that I served as a school administrator, and teachers getting in themselves and putting their foot in their mouth, or something happening, being able to guide them and bring assurance to them that everything was going to be okay, was a way of me giving back to them and relieving their stress. So thank you for those two moments where your emotional intelligence and your coaching just really supported me in my life. And I've been able to now learn from that and support other teachers.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was easy because by the time I got to you, I already made hundreds of mistakes. So that none of us are without fault, right? So having grace with those we work with is important, especially with one-off mistakes. Obviously, it's different from people who repeat the same type of mistake over and over again, don't learn from those situations. That's a whole different situation, but that's not the case for most of the professionals we work with. And all we have to do is think of our own examples of when we've failed, put our foot in our mouth, or made errors of judgment. We all do that. So can we learn from that? Yes, given the right support. And so, yeah, it was easy to do that, knowing that that's human nature. We just have to learn from our mistakes and get better next time. And because we're all imperfect, for sure.
Yeah, that is rightly so. And just one last question, and if you could just finish off with just giving a piece of advice and wisdom, just to any coaches, teachers, school administrators, directors, anyone working at the district level, county office, what in any leadership role, even a little league coach, what should they prioritize early? What do you think should be something that they should prioritize? And if it's not early for them, what can they prioritize today to pretty much change maybe the rest of the leadership philosophies?
Yeah, on top of what we've said, I think that one theme that goes throughout my leadership is that you've got to be a learner. Um, you obviously, if you're in a leadership position, you got there because someone saw something in you, you're good at something. But every time you change leadership positions, you've got to go back to being that beginner mind once again and learn. The mistakes I've made is when I thought I knew everything and stopped learning from my colleagues, from those who have been there before me. So what that means, just having an open mind and listening to the people around you with expertise, being a reader, read about your field, read outside your field, especially in this day and age where readers are even more rare, it appears. Those who really take the time to invest in their own education and their own learning are the type of leaders that we need. I think talk about AI and where that's leading us, who knows where that's leading us, but all of us who are in the leadership position need to think about the implications of AI in education. I know we were part of a team at the county this past month where we were talking about the way to teach AI literacy. But a leader has to really understand the times we live in, think deeply about the issues that society is imposing upon schools, and then make clear guidance and direction for those whom we work with to build better schools, build better communities. And you can only do that, I think, if you have that learner's mindset at all times and realize that tomorrow is going to be different than yesterday, and we got to keep having that open mind to learn what we need for today.
Well said. Very well said. And thank you so much, Dr. Winters, just for being a part of this conversation, sharing your stories and authenticity behind it as well. And I want to thank all of you that just tuned in today for the Innovative Pedagogy Leadership Series. And if you want to connect with Dr. Winters, I'll drop his how can people get a hold of you? You need a website, LinkedIn. I know you have LinkedIn, but I'll put Dr. Winters' contact information. I'll gather that in a moment, but it'll be in the show notes. And I know he's open up to consultations and supporting school-wide initiatives, district initiatives, coaching. So if anyone needs just wisdom or a sounding board out there, please do yourself a favor and reach out to Dr. Daniel Winters for that. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, please visit my website at garciaedtech.com. Or you can email me as well at cbgarcia@sandiego.edu. We look forward to having you tune in next month for our next leadership series. And thank you for joining us on this journey. All right, take care.